Before her death, former Graceland Maid finally revealed the truth about Elvis, and it's not good. For over 4 decades, she guarded his secrets. Nancy Rooks spent 10 years inside the inner sanctum of Graceland, witnessing moments no fan would ever see. The quiet breakfasts, the late-night conversations, the gradual changes that preceded tragedy. And while she maintained her dignified silence for years after Elvis Presley's passing, something changed in her final days. She decided the world deserved to know what really happened behind those famous gates. Revelations that would shake the foundation of Elvis's carefully preserved legacy. What did this loyal housekeeper witness that troubled her conscience for so long? What memories haunted her into her final years? And why, after protecting his legacy for decades, did she finally feel compelled to speak? The answers paint a complicated portrait of America's most beloved musical icon. Nancy Rooks joined the Graceland staff in 1967, during what many consider Elvis's comeback period. Memphis was buzzing with excitement as their hometown hero prepared to return to performing after years focused on Hollywood. What began as simple housekeeping duties evolved into something far more intimate. She didn't just clean Elvis's home, she became part of his daily existence, a constant presence in a world otherwise defined by chaos and change. While millions adored him from afar, Nancy knew the man who padded through the kitchen at odd hours, requesting Southern comfort food and occasionally joining her in impromptu gospel sing-alongs. She witnessed his private phone calls, his moments of doubt, his frustrations with the entertainment industry, and the personal demons he never displayed on stage. He never forgot his manners, she would later recall in interviews that carefully revealed just enough without crossing invisible boundaries. Despite his astronomical fame, the man she knew always said please and thank you. This wasn't the jumpsuit-wearing icon the world worshipped. This was simply Mr. Elvis, a person with quirks, habits, and vulnerabilities invisible to the public eye. Her position required unusual dedication and discretion. Elvis's reversed schedule meant Nancy often worked through the night, preparing meals at hours when most households were deep in slumber. She arranged his belongings, prepared his favorite dishes, and adapted to a lifestyle where conventional boundaries rarely existed. The Graceland staff weren't merely employees, they were keepers of secrets, witnesses to the unvarnished reality behind the carefully managed public image. In her 1990s memoir, Inside Graceland, Nancy shared charming anecdotes about Elvis's fastidious cleanliness habits, specific food preferences, and the kindness he showed staff. She recounted how he often requested the same meals repeatedly, how he sometimes wandered the mansion at night when unable to sleep, how he could be simultaneously generous and demanding. Yet those who knew her sensed she deliberately omitted certain details. There were shadows in her stories, places where her normally flowing recollections suddenly grew vague, topics she would delicately steer away from when conversations ventured too close to uncomfortable truths. There were things I didn't think people needed to hear, she once admitted in a quiet interview years later. Not then, anyway. Some things you keep to yourself, out of respect. But what were those things? What had she witnessed that required such careful navigation? The morning of August 16, 1977, began unremarkably. Elvis had been playing racquetball until the early hours with his fiancée, Ginger Alden, and cousin Billy Smith. When he returned to the house, Nancy was already in the kitchen, ready to prepare whatever he might request. This was their routine, her presence a constant in his unpredictable world. "No breakfast today," he told her. "Just water." Something about his demeanor struck her as unusual. His complexion appeared different, perhaps paler than usual, his movements slower, his usual energy diminished. When another staff member brought him a pitcher of ice water, they later commented on how desperately he drank from it. Behavior that seemed peculiar even for someone who'd been exercising. Nancy later recalled that moment as the first warning sign that something wasn't right, though she couldn't have known its significance at the time. Around 9:30 that morning, Nancy heard an unusual sound from upstairs. Not alarming enough to investigate, but significant enough to register in her memory. A thump, followed by silence. Hours passed with the usual rhythm of household activities. Then at approximately 1:50 p.m., frantic words came through the intercom. Ginger's distressed voice. "Something terrible has happened up here." Nancy rushed upstairs, taking the familiar steps two at a time, her heart racing as she navigated the hallway toward Elvis's suite. She found Elvis unresponsive on his bathroom floor. What followed was chaos. Calls for help, the arrival of paramedics, and ultimately the devastating news that would shock the world. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had died at just 42 years old. The official cause? Cardiac arrest. But as time passed, questions multiplied, whispers grew louder, and inconsistencies in the official narrative became harder to ignore. Why was there confusion about the timeline between when Elvis was last seen alive and when emergency services were called? What happened to prescription bottles reportedly present at the scene? Why did toxicology reports undergo multiple revisions before being released to the public? And why did Dr. George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, who had prescribed thousands of doses of medications to Elvis in his final years, initially have his medical license suspended, but later be acquitted of criminal charges? Most importantly, why did those closest to Elvis, including Nancy, remain so guarded about the details of his final days and hours? For years following his death, Nancy continued working at Graceland as it transitioned from private residence to public museum. She helped preserve Elvis's legacy, arranging displays and ensuring that visitors experienced the sanitized version of Elvis's life that the estate wanted to project. The upstairs quarters where Elvis died remained off-limits to tourists, and according to some accounts were cleaned only occasionally, preserving them almost as they were that fateful day. Every time Nancy entered those rooms to dust or straighten, memories of August 16th likely flooded back. The bathroom where it happened, the carpet where paramedics knelt, the bed where attempts to revive him failed. Yet publicly, she maintained her discretion, speaking only in the most general terms about her beloved employer, focusing on his generosity, his talent, his impact on her life, rather than the circumstances of his death. Then came her diagnosis. Facing her own mortality, Nancy reportedly began speaking more candidly to those in her inner circle. The weight of secrets becomes heavier when time grows short. "I did my duty for the family," one friend quoted her saying. "But I think someday before I go, the truth needs to be told. There are things people should understand about what happened." What truth? According to those close to her final conversations, Nancy expressed growing concern about what she had witnessed in Elvis's last weeks and months. She allegedly spoke of seeing him increasingly dependent on medication, sometimes falling asleep mid-sentence or in unusual circumstances, at the dinner table during conversations, even while standing. She mentioned prescription bottles appearing with alarming frequency, some with labels belonging to other people, some with warnings that went unheeded. She reportedly described a household atmosphere where Elvis's declining health had become normalized, where his slurred speech, disorientation, and erratic behavior were accommodated rather than addressed. The Memphis Mafia, his inner circle of friends and employees, had allegedly created a protective bubble that ultimately failed to protect him from himself. Most troublingly, she reportedly revealed that immediately after finding Elvis unresponsive, someone, she never publicly named who, instructed her to clean up just a little before authorities arrived. At the time, she complied without question, a decision that apparently weighed on her conscience as years passed and questions about Elvis's death remained unanswered. "I didn't know what I was covering up," she purportedly confided to a close friend. "I just did what I was told. That's how things worked at Graceland. You didn't ask questions." But later, when I heard all the talk about what medications were found, what might have been removed before police arrived, I wondered if I had been part of something I didn't understand. Her most profound revelation wasn't about a sudden collapse, but a gradual decline. Elvis didn't just die, he faded. and no one stopped it. We all saw it happening. The weight gain, the mood swings, the isolation. He wasn't the same person anymore. Sometimes I'd catch him looking lost in his own home, like he didn't know where he was. We all noticed, but what could we do? He was Elvis. This perspective suggests something more troubling than a sudden heart attack. It points to a slow-motion tragedy where those closest to Elvis may have enabled his self-destruction or felt powerless to intervene. It raises uncomfortable questions about the responsibility of staff and friends when a celebrity begins a downward spiral. Nancy Rooks passed away in 2022, leaving behind these unsettling suggestions without the opportunity for further clarification. She never sought publicity for her final reflections. No media tours, no exposés, just quiet words shared with those she trusted, which eventually found their way to a wider audience. The reaction to her alleged revelations has been mixed and emotionally charged. Some fans reject them entirely, preferring to preserve the pristine image of Elvis they've cherished for decades. They question why she would wait so long to speak if what she witnessed was truly troubling. Others view her words as a necessary, if painful, piece of the historical record, an acknowledgement that even legends are vulnerable to the pressures surrounding them, and that the truth, however uncomfortable, has inherent value. Elvis researchers and biographers have begun re-examining the timeline of his final days through the lens of Nancy's alleged statements. They're revisiting witness accounts, medical reports, and the contradictory statements made by those present at Graceland on August 16th. What emerges isn't a new conspiracy theory, but a more nuanced understanding of how fame, wealth, and power can create environments where obvious problems go unaddressed. The Presley estate has remained silent on these claims. Graceland continues welcoming visitors who explore the public rooms, while the upstairs bathroom where Elvis was found remains private, its secrets intact. The gift shops still sell memorabilia celebrating Elvis at his peak, not the troubled man Nancy described in her final days. What makes Nancy's alleged final disclosures so powerful isn't sensationalism, but their source. A woman who spent years in loyal service, who knew Elvis as few others did, who witnessed his daily struggles and triumphs. She wasn't a tabloid informant seeking profit or attention. She was a constant presence in his world, someone who observed patterns and changes that occasional visitors might miss. Perhaps her greatest legacy isn't exposing scandal, but illuminating humanity. If her accounts are accurate, they remind us that behind every icon stands real people, both the celebrities themselves and those who serve them, making choices, facing pressures, and sometimes failing to prevent tragedy despite seeing warning signs. Her story also raises profound questions about loyalty. At what point does protecting someone's image become less important than acknowledging their struggles? When does silence shift from respectful discretion to harmful complicity? These are questions that extend far beyond Elvis and Graceland. They apply to how we treat all public figures whose private battles often remain hidden until it's too late. He was still a good man, Nancy reportedly said near the end of her life. That never changed. But good people can get lost, and sometimes the people who love them most don't know how to bring them back. What remains is a question only you can answer. Was Nancy Rooks right to eventually break her silence? Or should some secrets remain forever entombed within Graceland's walls? And what responsibility do we, as a culture obsessed with celebrity, bear for creating systems where people are valued more as icons than as fragile human beings?